I guess I've said this a lot, so if you've heard me talk very much, you've probably heard this before, but God could do anything He wanted to do. I think we all would agree with that, right? He could have done it any way He wanted to do it, and I say it. The it is, life on earth and us being here in the year 2023 and having been here for some 6,000 to 10,000 years and all the things that have already happened and that are going to happen. He could have done it any way He wanted to do it. And I've always said, He could have we could have all had our own planet and just been individuals and not had people around us. And I think that, in my mind anyway, I can see the wisdom in doing it this way, as opposed to giving us all a different planet and separating us. What do you see the benefit? What would be the benefit? What is the benefit of living with others? I mean, there's probably more than one. I'm sure there's more than one. In fact, I could probably say it a couple of different ways. But say it again. It's cheaper? Yeah. I mean living on a planet by yourself, not living in a house by yourself. Say it again. Companionship. Accountability. How can you be a servant if there's no one to serve? So those kind of thoughts are kind of where I was going. We're kind of trying to use a word that Paul uses here in Ephesians, which, love would be, learning to love would be probably the big word that you might throw out there with this, but which goes with the companionship. But it's what we learn. What do we learn from being with each other? And that's kind of where I see the value in being together is, and what God's trying to do is teach us stuff, okay, and prepare us for eternity. Does give you training. Does give you good training. In fact, if you go back to chapter 5, back to verse 21, I think, or 22, he begins. Can you flip that back to chapter 5, verse 22, please? Jim's going to get good at Esau here. 5:22, he's talking about, actually verse 21, he says, submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of God. So submission is the thought here. And he began with wives and husbands, and he goes on with children and parents. He goes on with servants and masters. Okay, all three, which is really this idea of submission. Which is, so what does it mean to submit? Being someone else, under someone else's authority, if you will. Submitting, putting yourself under another, okay? Taking direction from another. And you can learn that, which again goes to the idea of love. If you really love somebody, which one of the things you do is you exalt them, okay? And so, you couldn't learn that if you were by yourself. And I believe it was Burton Kaufman's comment on these verses here that struck me as interesting. If you look at these three classes, ladies, children, and servants, in the first century, do you think they had much, what's the right word? I don't even know how he said it. Standing would be my recognition. Do you think ladies, servants, and children had much standing in the? No, they didn't. Okay, so and you might say, well, Paul by inspiration here, and he's telling these groups what their role is. Okay, and he is. I don't doubt that. But the thought that came to my mind is they had no standing. Without the Word has brought standing to those three. Okay, wherever Christianity has gone, their lot in life has improved. Okay, and I believe this was either David Lipe when we were talking about discipline or Gary Hampton. I can't remember which one said it in one of his sermons, but maybe it's Gary Hampton. But saying, talking about the old, and it's an old story that they tell about the guy sending his kids to school and sends little Johnny to school and goes and talks to the teacher and says, if little Johnny is bad, if you'll just get on to the kid next to him, he'll figure it out, okay? And I totally messed that up, but kind of the same. I think it's kind of the idea here. Paul is talking. He talks to the wives, but he also talks. But as a supplement, he mentions the husbands, and he talks to the children. But as a supplement, he talks to the parents and specifically the fathers. And then he talks to the bondservants, but then he specifically mentions the masters, which in our day we would probably most correlate that relationship to the employer-employee relationship. So is he really talking to those three groups? Well, yes. But or is he also, and if you're somebody who fits all three of those other groups, the husband, the father, and the employer, I was going to suggest he's really talking to you, okay? And he's really telling you, again, if you put yourself in the first century, and you're a man, say you're a husband of a wife, and now Paul, by inspiration, is talking to her like she is, respectable, and telling me I need to respect her. Well, that should get my attention, okay? And then he's talking to children about how they ought to act. Well, yeah, you need to tell them children how to act, but then fathers, this is how you got to do it, okay? So it's like you got to treat them like somebody. You can't treat them like they're nobody. Okay, and then of course employers to your employees, does it matter how we treat people? Do we learn anything do people learn anything about us by the way we treat people? Or is anybody watching how we treat people? Oh, absolutely. Okay, absolutely. All right, but anyway, children. And so is this little kids? Middle, is this under 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 20, 25 to 30? How old are these children? They'd have to be old enough to understand it, right? And so I'm going to say that it could be any of them, all right? It could be any of them, but yeah, they'd have to be old enough to understand it. We're not talking about little bitty kids necessarily, because they wouldn't even understand what was going on. But and then the phrase, obey your parents in the Lord. Don't you just love taking one phrase at a time? What does in the Lord mean? Well, there's two or three ideas, okay? It could be, are these children members of the church? Are they in the Lord? Are they old enough to have obeyed the gospel? And certainly that'd probably be a primary group, right? Who he's talking to. Would it be if your parents ask you to do something that's righteous? In other words, if they ask you to do something that's unrighteous, do you still have to obey them? We know that from other texts, right? That's not necessary. So yeah, it needs to be something that they're asking you. They don't need to be asking you to do something that's sinful. Can you imagine a parent putting their child in a situation like that? Certainly not a Christian parent, I wouldn't think. Right. So I'm going to say it's probably, it could be a combination of any of these thoughts I'm not saying which one's right. Yes, sir.
An interesting verse in
Proverbs.
23rd chapter and 22nd verse. He says, hearken unto thy father that begat thee, and despise not thy mother when she is old.
Right. I think I made a... Right. Is it, rather than just ask the question, is it a big deal to be a parent? Absolutely, all right? Is it a tremendous responsibility to be a parent? Absolutely. You have been placed with the care of a soul or more than one soul, and how you influence that soul. You've been given the opportunity to try to mold that soul and get that soul to heaven, which is really what life's all about. And if you fail in that, it's a failure. But do kids stand on their own? Are you completely responsible for everything your kid does? I guess is a question. Now, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. True or false? True. Bible says it, Solomon said it, right? You know any, I don't know your relationship with your children or if they're faithful or not. I'm not, but and I know there's people who have regrets. Maybe you became faithful as a Christian late in life, way after you stopped having influence over children, and so forth. So there's all kinds of situations, and but this phrase that Solomon said, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it." Do they? What is that? Okay, so yes, they stand on their own 2 feet. They're going to answer for themselves. You're going to answer for yourself, right? What is it that they're not going to depart from? If you've taught them, they have the teaching inside them. They may literally depart from it in terms of they don't obey it, but I'm convinced that everything you ever needed to know you learned in kindergarten, right? Whatever that's it. I'm convinced if once you got it in there, you don't forget it. Okay? And so they may fall away, they may do things that you wouldn't like them to do, but the training that you gave them, I don't think they can ever forget it. Okay? And so hopefully that is working on them even while they may be. That's the way what's your thoughts on that, Alan? You got any thoughts on Solomon's Bird? I mean, we certainly, there's obviously there's obviously 1,000 different ways to influence a child, but our influence of a child is certainly very important. I don't think, and I'm an expert parent standing up here. I don't think there's anything more valuable you can teach your child, and this goes along with what this text is talking about, than respect for authority. If they don't respect your authority, how do you ever expect them to have respect for God's authority? If they don't respect your authority, how do you ever expect them to respect their teacher, the government, anybody, any role? We're all here on this planet together, and we all experience different roles, right? And I already mentioned the role of parent and husband and employer and employee. I've been a child. We all have these different roles that we get to experience while we're here on this earth, and authority has a lot to do with those roles. Okay, and a child learning respect for authority is huge. Is in my mind fundamental. And it goes to what Paul's saying here. Okay, so children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor thy father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise. Honor thy father and mother. What commandment number is that? Of the Decalogue, of the 10 commandments. Do you know? It's number 5, I think. At least that's what the commentator said. I didn't go back and count them. I should have went and counted them. But it's number 5, I think. And is that Exodus 20 where the 10 commandments are? You can go check it. But is it the first one in that list with a promise? The answer would be no. Pretty much all of them have a promise associated with them. So what does that mean? It's the first, and actually he's quoting an Old Testament passage here. This is not, and it's actually, I believe, is that Exodus 20? It's right after the 10 Commandments where it's said. Or maybe it's right where this one is given. Is it verse 21, Exodus 20, 21? 20:12, thank you. And it's said a couple of times in the Old Testament. It's not the only time that that's said. But so what does it mean that it's the first commandment with promise? First commandment to who? And the fifth one's the first one in relationship to others. So that is one of the commentators. That was one of the thoughts. Okay, it could be the first one associated with a relationship. It's actually, if you're a child, it's probably the first one that applies to you. Okay, and but anyway, what is the promise? Huh? That thy days may be long in the land, and Paul restates it here, saying that you may live long on the earth. Okay, is it? Does the way you treat your parents, or respect your parents, or honor your parents, as opposed to dishonoring or rebelling, would that have any impact on how long you live, physically? It very well could. Right? Don't do that. Well, you did it. Oh. Couldn't stop you. I mean, I've got, two beautiful little grandsons and a little granddaughter. The granddaughter's getting old enough now where she's getting a little more cautious, I guess is the right word. The boys are fearless. I mean, they have no idea what can hurt them and what don't. It's like, because I don't have any door. I'm working on my daughter's house, trying to get them in it, and I don't have any doorknobs on the doors yet. And man, you talk about slamming doors. Them little boys can slam them doors. And I'm like, you're going to mash a finger. You're going to mash a finger. And what do you do 2 seconds later? Mashed a finger. I mean, with me yelling, stop. Okay, they have no clue what can hurt them. And Davey's even got to where he's seen Marin try to turn cartwheels. Okay, so now he's flipping over in the floor, and I'm like, man, he just does a belly buster on the floor, actually on his back when he gets flipped over, and he's just so happy that I'm like, you're going to kill yourself. I don't know how. But anyway, so can it affect how long you live if you obey your parents?
Jonathan,
Yes, sir.
won't you read in Deuteronomy, about the 5th chapter, and the 16th verse, it really expands on what you're talking about.
Deuteronomy 5:16.
Yeah,
Deuteronomy 5,
verse 16.
verse 16. Honor thy father and thy mother, as the Lord thy God hath commanded thee, that thy days may be prolonged, and that it may go well with thee in the land which the Lord the God giveth thee. Yes.
Of course, he was talking to specific people, but that would be
Same. It's pretty much what Paul's saying here in Ephesians. It's quoting, I guess. Yes, sir. Well, I have that verse on these many papers here somewhere where, yeah, if it was, and it's a pretty, let's see if I can find it. There's Deuteronomy 5:16. God wants children to understand that honoring their parents is in their own best interest, physically, mentally, and spiritually. Life will go much smoother. What's that?
Cursing your parents to me to be stoned.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I think in rabbinic tradition that's never actually happened. The Jewish parents have never taken their child out and been stoned. That the principle is there, I think, for a reason.
Right. Well, one thing too was to, is it good for the family if you've got one rebellious that gets its way all the time and nothing ever comes to it? What effect would that have on the others? Little leaven leaveneth the whole lump, right? As I thought. So one thing about disciplining is to protect the others, not just to fix the one. Okay. Fathers, let's see. Honor thy father and thy mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with thee and thou may live long on the earth. And ye fathers. Why didn't he say mothers? Say it again. That's right. What was you saying? He's the head of the household. He's the leader, right? And where fathers were probably pretty often the ones who did the provoking, I would think. Okay. Is it, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. What's the difference between nurture and admonition? Two different words. Nurture would probably, this was, one of the commentators said, nurture probably suggests the training of an early education, a younger child, where admonition would be like advice and talking to an older child, maybe an adult. Okay, next section, verse 5 through, how far did I say that went? 5 through 9. Let's read that. Can you scroll down, please? Thank you. Servants, be obedient to them that are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling, in singleness of heart as unto Christ, not with eye service as men pleasers, but as servants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, with good will doing service as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that whatsoever good thing any man doeth, the same shall he receive of the Lord, whether he be bond or free. And you masters, do the same things unto them, forbearing, threatening, knowing that your master also is in heaven, neither is there respect of persons with him. You know, another, this is the same thought, I guess, but I'm going to say it a different way. What does this teach us about our relationship with other people? We're all, as far as God is concerned, we're all equal, right? Just it happens so be that they're younger. The child's younger than me, and they're mine. Someday they're going to be old enough to run their own lives, right? And someday I'm not going to be here, and they're going to be my. So roles are going to shift. But what we learn is that we're all, and employees or servants are just. I mean, can you imagine this doctrine in the first century? That your servant is just as valuable to God as you are. That somebody brand new in the church that doesn't know anything is just as valuable to God as me, and I've been here for 40 years or whatever. Okay, that we're all equal, and that's not to say we don't have different degrees of faith and different degrees of faithfulness and different degrees of, because we're all on a hopefully on this trajectory and growth pattern. But as far as God is concerned, we're all equal. And that's one of the things I think Paul's teaching them. And that's one of the things we learn from this, from being here together and submitting one to another. Submit, it's easy to say, you need to submit to Christ. He's not saying that. By submitting to Christ, you need to submit to your children. You need to take care of how you deal with your children. You need to take care of how you deal with your wife. You need to take care of how you deal with your employees, your servants. Onesimus.
Didn't send him back to say free. He sent him back and said, he's your brother.
Right.
Now do what you think.
Right. That's good.
It's probably easier for us, that our society tends to lean that way, but like places like India, where they've offered these caste systems, that's still bumping against the
Right.
expectation of society.
Which when the gospel goes places, it fixes those things, okay? Yeah, they were dogs. They're dogs, but now they're as good as me. Right. Right. Which is the word that comes to my mind is humbling, right? Humility. All right, yes, Sir Donald.
Going back to that word respect, I think that this is also teaching us that, that's something that we sort of like. How many of us respect our employees? How many of us respect our local leaders? How many of us respect our family?
Right. Right.
So he said, you don't just respect your parents, but he said you serve them, you slaves are supposed to respect.
Right. Yeah, I've been hammering on the employer side, yeah, which he, again focuses on the other side here. Would you be faithful if you stood around the water cooler talking about, your boss in a bad way? No, you wouldn't. He's saying you need to be obedient to them. And people need to be able to see it. Christians ought to be the best employees you could find. You ought to be able to see a difference in you than those who are not. In verse 6, I don't know, I haven't known a lot of Bible all my life, I guess, but this is one verse I think I've known a long time because it has always stuck with me. Not with eye service as men pleasers. Because I think I saw at an early age what eye service as men pleasers was, right? You ever see, what eye service as men pleasers is, right? You've seen it, right? When you're working with somebody, and boy, they really shape up when the boss is around. But they just sit down and do nothing when he's gone, right? And leave it all for you to do. Because who's really our boss? The Lord is. We need to be acting like we're working for Him, because we are, not somebody else. Doing the will of God from the heart with sincerity. Okay, it's not fake. Fake is when you do it when just somebody you care sees you. Okay, but doing it from the heart is different. With good will doing service as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that whatsoever good thing any man doeth, the same shall he receive of the Lord, whether he be bond or free. That's not the only time. There's other verses in Scripture that say similar things. If I could find them, I'd rattle them off to you. But that's interesting. That, and of course we know, right? I mean, we all know that eventually we're going to have our reward, right? Heaven is a reward that it doesn't matter what you do to me here. I really don't care. I'm ready, because heaven's what it's all about. And heaven, while eye hath not seen nor ear heard, nor has even entered into the heart of man, you can't even imagine what God has prepared for them that love Him. And but does this? What about? And this is not a prosperity gospel, but could God bless us here? Yeah, in eternity, definitely. But is it possible for God to bless us here? And to give us things as a result of our doing what He tells us to do? Absolutely. Who knows best how to live life? We've already said a parent, it's better for a child to listen to a parent than not, because the parent knows what's, they're a little older, got a little time on them. They can tell you what's getting ready to happen. Who knows absolutely best way to live? The one who wrote the book, the one who designed all this stuff, okay? And does he just telling you what to do because he wants to dangle you around like a puppet on a string and say, you can't do that, you can't do that? No, he wants you to do what's best for you. He knows what's best for you and me. And if I follow His will, it will definitely be better for me. Okay. And ye masters do the same things unto them, forbearing, threatening, knowing that your master also is in heaven, either is their respective persons with Him. There's that concept of everybody's equal. So that's pretty big. That's pretty, like I say, pretty eye-opening to some people in the world. Yes, sir. Right. Yeah, I'm not saying every situation is easy to do that. I mean, and Paul's not saying it either, and I don't think you're saying it, but is it possible that a servant has a master who's not listening to this? Oh, yeah. It's probably pretty probable, okay? It's more likely that a Christian servant would have someone over them who is not a Christian and who would not be listening to Paul's words, okay? So that would definitely make it more difficult, but certainly not a reason not to be obedient. Okay, next section, the whole armor of God. Scroll down, please, Jim. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore take unto you the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all to stand, stand therefore. Having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace, above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked. And take the helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, and watching thereunto with all perseverance and supplication for all saints. And for me, that utterance may be given unto me, that I may open my mouth boldly to make known the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in bonds, and therein I may speak boldly as I ought to speak. I'm just going to comment on that last, as he ended that right there real quick, because we probably aren't going to get there. Isn't that, what did Paul ask them to pray for him? What? Say it again. Boldness. Paul, really? You're pretty bold, Paul. I'm just saying. And you don't think you're bold enough? I'm sure I've been influenced by this verse, but even before this, before this class and where I was thinking about this verse, that's one of my prayers. It's one thing to see opportunities. It's another to unlock my tongue and speak. Okay, give me boldness to tell them what I know to be true. Well, of course you got to, you're always trying to. You don't want to. Just say the truth. People need to hear the truth. And I'm not saying say it I still think speaking the truth in love, which was that in Ephesians? It's in Ephesians. Was it verse 4, chapter 4, chapter 5? And yes, what we always say. I'm not saying it's not true. What we always say is you got to be careful how you say things. That's what speaking the truth in love is. I suggest to you it even might be something deeper than that, or different than that, or slightly different, slightly nuanced to that, is holding back the truth is not loving. Speak the truth. Love them enough to speak the truth. Now, yeah, you need to try to say it in a way that they want to hear it, or that you're not like mean to them. I'm not saying be mean to them. I'm saying love them enough to tell them what they need to hear. That's the only way they're going to learn. But anyway, Paul, praying for boldness that he could to open his mouth and to make known the mystery of the gospel, for which I'm an ambassador, that therein I may speak boldly as I ought to speak. I know I ought to do it, but give me the boldness to do it. Pray that for me, please. Add that to your prayer list for me, because I want that. Okay, back up to the top. Finally, my brethren, this is the end of chapter 6. It's the last admonition in this epistle to the church at Ephesus. He says, finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. He's talked about the riches of the glory, according to the riches of your glory. Well, how much glory does God have? All of it, okay? When Moses wanted to see God's glory. You can't see my face, you'll die. I can go here and hide you under this rock and put my hand over you and I'll walk by. Then when he comes down, he's shining so bright that they can't even look at him. How much glory does God have? According to the riches of your glory, to be strengthened with might by his Spirit in the inner man. That was a prayer back in chapter 3 or 4. But it's a similar thought here. Be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. How much power does he have? God's on your side. You don't have to worry about anything. He's got it under control. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. This is a battle, right? Is he describing a battle? Talking about armor? And so is this like kids play? Is this like, Davy and Major rolling around in the floor? Is that what this is? No. The people, who are we fighting against? Flesh and blood? Spiritual warfare. Well, look at how he describes the forces we're fighting against. He says we don't wrestle against flesh and blood. And he uses these words here: principalities and powers, rulers of the darkness of this world, spiritual wickedness in high places. Thoughts on what? I mean, because I've got thoughts. I've read thoughts. I don't know that I know exactly what Paul's talking about. But does it sound like these are weak beings? Does it sound like this is child's play? Does it sound like this is something you don't really have to worry about?
Jonathan,
You don't really have to prepare for?
this same preacher, Brother Paul, in Colossians, he said, strengthen with all might according to his glorious power unto all patience, long-suffering with joyfulness.
God can definitely strengthen us. He has the ability to do that, and we can enjoy that strengthening, right? Is that kind of with joyfulness? Yes.
It gives us strength through this armor. It gives us defense. So much defense that we are able to speak without fear of anything. Speak boldly. There's no apprehension.
You know what though, Dennis? God does it all. He's got all this power, and if you just step back and do nothing, He's going to give you all this, right? Is that what Paul's saying? Just attend every service, which I'm not. I'm glad you're here. Don't take this. I don't want you to think I'm saying you're doing a bad thing by being here. But is this all you got to do? Is this part of this? Is this part of this? It is definitely part of this. Some people, the ones that aren't here, aren't doing this, right? Oh yeah, yeah. Oh no. Yeah. Yeah. This is a real battle against real opponents, and it takes real effort to prepare to be in battle. You will not be victorious in the battle if you do not prepare. God did not say, Paul did not say, sit back and God's going to give you His armor. He says you got to put it on. You got to make the effort to put it on. And I saw hand Dan. What was you going to say? Go jump out of what? Oh, it doesn't jump out of the sky. Yeah. No, it's not going to just infect you, right?
This goes back. We are His children. This goes back to the nurture. He gives us the things that are necessary for what we need. And then the admonition comes along as a warning to come.
Steve?
Saul put the armor on David to fight Goliath, and he took it back off because he said, I'm not testing you. You can't just put the armor on, you've got to learn how to use it.
That's good. You got to exercise or practice, okay? And you can there's opportunities to do that, right? There's opportunities to you got to. So basically, it comes. So he says, again, I wanted to focus just a minute on who it is we're fighting against, and impress upon us that it's not a small thing. It's a big deal, and it takes effort to be prepared to go to that battle. It don't happen in a day, okay? It's a process. And that putting on that you may be able to stand. And so look at the wiles of the devil. What's a wile? All I can think of is Wile E. Coyote, right? And it's true. That's what is wile? Trickery, right? Deceit. And so it's a big deal to be able to identify what's real, what's true, what's not lies, what's not misinformation. And boy, I sure hate somebody else telling me what misinformation is, right? Because if they get to decide what misinformation is, then and that's what they think they can do. If we just say this enough, it'll become the truth. right? And that's not anything new. That goes back to what, Mein Kampf or something, way back there in history. If you just say a lie 1,000 times, people begin to believe it. So it's important to be able to identify what the truth is, and that comes as part of this armor. And I like that. Spiritual wickedness in high, of course, places in italics, in high places. Well, that phrase, I think you think that, and you think, well, that might be, high places in the government. Well, I mean, maybe, but it's actually the same Greek word that was translated in the heavenlies 5 times in the book of Ephesians. Okay, it's the same Greek word in the heavenlies. So this spiritual wickedness in the heavenlies, which again it goes to Satan and his angels, I think. But anyway, all right. Wherefore, take on the whole armor of God, so you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all to stand, stand, having your loins girt about with truth. So you need to the girdle. Oh, there's the bell. The girdle is the most basic, primary part of the armor. It's the first thing you put on, and it's the change that takes place by reading it. It all starts with the book. Okay, and thank you very much. I'm going to stop talking because